So welcome this morning to all our members and especially new members. Ella Young is one of our newer members and a regular at our Connect on Thursday sessions. Ella has a degree in natural sciences, but after university, she was unsure what kind of career she wanted. And so she became a rolling stone. On voluntary service overseas in her early 20s, she fell in love with Africa whilst teaching in Uganda. Married in 1969, her husband Bev worked for the British Council, and the rolling kept going to Nigeria, Indonesia, and Nepal, as well as London, where Ella taught biology and A-level environmental studies, all whilst bringing up two sons. Sadly widowed while she was still young, Ella became an active environmental campaigner. And later, still rolling, she lived in Prague, where her eldest son and family lived. And at Christmas time, some of you may remember that she shared with us the Czech and Slovak traditions at Christmas time. The rolling has finally stopped in Topsham, and what a wonderful place for it to stop. And we're fortunate this morning as one of Ella's many talents is writing poetry. We're going to hear a selection of Ella's poems read by Ella and four of our members, David Whiten, Chris Ponsford, Margot Lynch and Susie Aubrey. So thank you to Ella and to our other four members. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Before I share my screen, I want to take the long view with some of you who may be round about my age group and ask two questions. If you were a teenager in the 50s or 60s, did you come across Young Elizabethan magazine? And if you did, could you just wave your hand? What's going on? Oh, Margaret did. Let me see if anyone on the other screen. Anybody else? Keep waving your hand. And Linda did. Great. Now, maybe more people will remember Ronald Searle's wicked cartoons of the St. Trinians girls. Can you wave your hands if you remember St. Trinians? Yes, that's many more people. Right, so let's start. If I can share my screen. Here we go. So now this lockdown project didn't really start in March last year. It really started about in October 1956. Maybe some of you remember wonderful teachers who encouraged you to do things and told you you were good at something. Well, I took this Young Elizabethan magazine and I used to go in for the competitions. And because the editor, Kay Webb, was married to Ronald Searle, there were the most wonderful prizes if you won a competition, like going to Pinewood Studios and becoming a St. Trinian's girl for the day, waving a hockey stick and screaming with Joyce Grenfell and George Cole and Alistair Sim. Anyway, they advertised a poetry competition to write a hate poem that had to be less than 10 lines. Now at school, we had to write boring poems, you know, like summer and autumn. And I thought, wow, a hate poem. All those great aunts who say, oh, how you've grown. And what are we doing with the kiddies today? And anyway, this was the poem I wrote. It was only got third prize. Now, I got the third prize for this rather naive poem. And I thought, well, I can write poetry. People with red fingernails, people with dyed hair, people who say kiddies, these I cannot bear. Road hogs in the countryside, lazy bones in bed, grown-ups who say, how you've grown, I wish they all were dead. So let's now come on to a year ago. Unfortunately, I didn't quite get the date in this photograph. I think it was in my bicycle basket. I see it's a bit tatty. I think it was the 16th of March. And I thought, I'll die. I can't stay at home for 4 months, and let alone a year. Of course, we didn't know that then. And I thought, what on earth am I going to do if I have to stay at home? And I enjoy writing. And when she died, my mother, who wasn't the famous detective writer, left me a lot of diaries and poems and letters, and committee meeting notes. She worked for the National Council for the Unmarried Mother and Her Child. And I thought, well, maybe I should write a biography of my mother, who died of cancer at the age of 70. And I also wanted to honor my brother, my youngest, my favorite brother, seeing here at his wedding in 1993, who at the time of lockdown was dying of pancreatic cancer. So I thought, I'm going to write something and raise money for cancer research. So I went to see this sparky lady, who some of you may know. Her name is Lily Neal. Maybe if any of you were at the Maynard School, you were at school with her, and she also taught at the Maynard. And now she owns and runs the Totsham Bookshop. And particularly in lockdown, she's had lots of time to edit and publish books for people. So I went to her and said, I think I'd like to write my autobiography, maybe something with my mother. And could I put in some poetry? And she has very decided opinion. She said, absolutely not. She said, it's either prose or poetry and not both. So I thought, well, the poetry is all ready. So I gave her a great bundle of poems, or I sent them my email, I think about 80. And she was quite rude. And she said, well, you know, I have to throw out these are awful. And I'll have to improve your scansion here and there, and so on. Anyway, so I sent her my poems in these sections. It was sort of in order, starting with people with red fingernails, and poems trying to keep my virginity as a student, and then environmental poems, and then saying goodbye forever was my husband's death, age 48, and then grumpy old woman, all my poems kind of spitting it out about traffic and people who sit their children in front of screens all day, and then what it's like to be a widow, hoping for another partner, and then internet dating, and finally poems that I'd written for other people. Well, she said my limericks were so awful, she wasn't going to put any of those in, and this was her titles. So these are the 7 sections, and they're actually, some of them are the first lines of poems. So the world is changing too fast, are environmental. On fire inside, the passionate ones. It was extraordinary. Most of the poems were either written before I had children or after my husband died, apart from those written in creative writing classes. So they're actually very few, because when one's bringing up children and teaching, there's not much time or energy. And then Saying Goodbye Forever, she called The Black Hole of Pain. I think Widow's Journey and Internet Dating, Looking for Love Again. And then all the silly poems and parodies, especially of Hilaire Belloc and Gilbert and Sullivan, and rude letters to supermarkets about overpackaging were in lighter mood. And finally, the birthday poems at the end. So I think much more attractive chapter titles. And then what to call the book, what to have for the cover picture. And when my husband was alive, we went to a Church of England church in North London, Mill Hill, St. Paul's Church, which was built by William Wilberforce in his old age, because he couldn't stand the Vicar of Hendon. And there was a great yew tree outside, and the churchyard was run as a nature reserve. And I wrote this poem about the yew tree. Here, Nobody sees the first celandines and sunny coltsfoot, the shy dog's Mercury beneath the oaks, only the big-eyed goldcrest picking insects and the long-tailed tit as she builds her nest in the ancient yew. There they sit in their cars, stop-starting bumper to bumper. Classic FM and Radio 1 fail to calm them, their bodies rusting with inactivity and frustration, their exhaust pipes vibrating with fiendish fumes which poison the ancient yew. Switch off, you drivers. Step out of your metal boxes. Step out of your shoes and free your feet to sense the growing grass. Stretch up your arms to the bursting buds. Taste real air inside you. Listen to spring around you. Feel the blood of your ancestors who planted the ancient yew. Well, Lily and I both have a friend, Jackie Jennings, who does wood engravings, and we commissioned her to do this, and she also did a sprig like that. And she said, if you want to use any of my other wood engravings for the book, please do. And this one of an Anthony Gormley statue absolutely, for me, symbolize what it's like when you've been a couple and you're all on your own in the world. And so that's the title picture for Looking for Love Again. And we were very lucky to find other pictures. My father-in-law was a dairy farmer, and he had this picture on the wall of his kitchen. And I think it comes from a 1930s calendar called the Farming Year. But instead of, being about reaping, here it's the Grim Reaper, and it's the black hole of pain around losing one's partner. Now, I had never seen this book because it's now out of print, and I've only been in Topsham for 5 years. But Barbara Vincent's son, Paul, let us use any of her lino cuts. And this is a very beautiful one that fits the poem about the River Exe. Now, I'm very lucky that my uncle married Shirley Hughes, the children's artist. She's in her 90s, still going strong. And she let me use this picture, which was originally in colour, in Tom and Lucy at the Seaside. And in the flat above me in Topsham lived another young children's artist called Katie Clemenson. And she gave me this lovely picture that goes next to the poem saying, don't always carry your children in cars and sit them in front of TV. Let them read, let them get out in nature, let them climb trees, let them watch snails, and so on. So, and this is the oldest man in the world, taken about a year ago. He's David's father, and he was 112, and I wrote his life story for his 112th birthday. So that's in the birthday section. So there it was, ready to be published. When the page proofs came back, there were 35 blank pages, and I said, not having this. And so the whole thing was redone. There's 1 or 2 blank pages that look like this, a kind of ghost, because my dear editor thinks that people only read the right-hand page in poetry books, not the left-hand one. So I was glad, and it also made the book, because it's beautiful quality paper, light enough to go for a lower postage rate. And here they are being unpacked. And now I want to introduce my readers. Susie runs the poetry group that I've just joined. I don't know her very well, and I'm delighted that she's reading a poem, even though she hasn't seen the book yet. So, Susie, over to you.
The poem I'm going to read is entitled Civilization. Lines of cars, fat cigars, cinemas, sex film cues, prigs in pews, dictated views, blue blood snobs, industrial knobs, well-paid jobs, noisy nights, nasty fights, garish lights, dismal streets, coppers beats, professional cheats, crowds and dogs, filthy fogs, road rage hogs, crowded bars, pin-up stars, lines of cars, lines of cars, lines of cars.
Thank you, Susie. I wrote that poem when I was 19, I think, living in the leafy green suburbs of northwest London, driving across London to view my grandmother's body and back again. I saw a side of life that I hadn't really experienced before. And this was a kind of poem that kind of gushed out, poured out with no effort, without any kind of stopping, as some of the poems do. Now, the next one is going to be read by Chris Ponsford. I met her at Pilates, but some of you may already know her because she belongs to a lot of groups: tennis, geology, a book group, and bake and taste. And she's going to read a poem, and in case you don't recognize them, these are stones from Budley Beach. Okay, Chris, over to you.
Change by Ella Young. Joy to sorrow, clouds to rain, buds to flowers, never the same. Full to new moon, youth to age, drought to flood, and calm to rage. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to laugh and a time to cry. Cliffs to sand and hills to plain, aeons pass, they're mountains again. Stars in heavens change each hour, petals fall from every flower. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to laugh and a time to cry. Autumn to winter, families spread an empty nest, lovers are dead. Round each cycle we must trust, leaves to soil and bodies to dust. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to laugh and a time to cry.
Thank you, Chris. I think I wrote that on my 59th birthday, realizing the only two certainties in life are change and death. Anyway, they're not all such miserable poems. Some of them are quite naughty. Anyway, I was still on my quest to find another partner. I don't know whether any of you have tried internet dating, where the photo you put is very important. And I saw this photo of this smiling man in a canoe, even though it looked like a flood. And I thought, well, yes. And he's now just moved to Exmouth. And about 2 or 3 years ago, the Royal Albert Memorial Museum in Exeter had a morning session about environmental poems, and you had to go around the museum until you found something that appealed to you. And then we had about 20 minutes to write a poem about that object and share with the group. And I found not actually this object, but I found the model of an Inuit canoe, which David is going to read a shortened version of that poem.
Kayak thoughts How wonderful to paddle, travel by canoe, over the lapping ocean where ice meets ripples in the crisp, clear air. They make their kayaks from sealskins sewn with gut, the wooden frame rescued from shipwrecks of long ago, made with skill and love, created by hands, not machines, nothing imported, no plastic. This self-sufficiency we have lost. Our world is changing too fast, too fast. Ice melts, then permafrost. Dark tundra absorbs the sun's rays. Buildings lean and roads subside. The ancient methane floats up to amplify the greenhouse heat. What can we do? Make sacrifices. Be aware that need differs from greed. Be imaginative, creative, adaptable in how we change the way we live.
Thank you, David. The next reader is one of those people I keep meeting. I'm delighted to meet her again and again. I think first of all, we met at choir in Topsham, and then we met dancing in Slovenia, and then we met again in the poetry group. And Margot also belongs to a book group, a music group, Latin in line group, and a walking group. And she is a great dancer, and she's going to explain what all these squiggles are about before she reads the poem. So over to you, Margot.
Before I read the poem, I'd like to say a little about this form of dance. The poem I'm going to read was written during a Gabriel Roth 5 Rhythms dance session. The idea behind this form of dance is to dance as the music makes you feel, and there are no set steps. It can lead the way to dancers expressing their feelings and emotions and bring back forgotten memories. 5 different styles and rhythm of music are played in a set order, and each represents a state of being. The sequence is known as the wave. During the session that Ella attended, the dancers were given 5 minutes to write down their feelings after each rhythm. This poem is the result of Ella's experience. Here is the poem. Written during a Gabriel Roth 5 Rhythms session. Flowing. The flowing dancer in me is the reflecting river, the seaward drifting birds, the golden bordered clouds, the crimson sunset, and the silent rising mist. Staccato. The warrior in me is the fierce hater of greed, of shop until you drop, of fast cars and road hogs, of beaters, abusers, and murderers of children, of selfishness, pomposity, and self-righteous prigs. Chaos. The wild dancer in me is the ecstatic orgasms of times past, electrocution and burning of my feet on hot coals, boulders crashing down the mountain onto me, fireworks which turn out to be bombs falling, from which the only escape is being a wild dancer. Lyrical. The child in me is dancing barefoot on the pearly morning grass, making melodies on my recorder, threading daisy chains for little people, paddling and jumping into the waves and eating ice cream. Stillness. The sacred in me is the embryonic life in seeds I plant, the children whose minds I awaken, how the mountain tops and the sun rising and the sea and the sun setting are the silent sky of a million, million stars dwarfs me.
Thank you, Margot. Beautifully read. Well, I think I've taken enough time, so let's finish quickly. There we are. So there I am with my editor, and here they are in the Tottenham bookshop. They actually got out just between lockdowns, but we never had a book launch. And one of my friends from Scotland was the first one to have it, and she rang up in great excitement and said, "It's a wonderful living legacy." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, look at my book, page 111. And I have her book, which I think is absolutely marvelous. So I looked in it, and I was amazed at what I read, because I thought I was writing a boastful, narcissistic lockdown project, and actually it was a living legacy. So thank you for your attention, and thank you all my readers.